It's easy to laugh at people from the past. After all, they believed some pretty wild things. That the sun revolved around Earth, that disease came from bad air, that your personality could be read from the shape of your skull. But here's the uncomfortable part. Most of these ideas didn't sound ridiculous at the time. In fact, many of them were considered serious science, serious medicine, or just common sense. And some were believed for hundreds, even thousands of years. So today, we're looking at 20 things people used to believe were true that turned out to be completely wrong. 20. The sun revolved around the Earth. For most of human history, people believed Earth sat at the center of the universe. This idea is called geocentrism. And to be fair, it makes total sense if you just look up. The sun appears to rise, move across the sky, and set. The stars seem to spin around us, and Earth feels perfectly still. So for ancient civilizations, it was natural to assume that everything revolved around us. The geocentric model was developed in detail by thinkers like Ptolemy, and it dominated astronomy for over 1,000 years. The problem: as astronomers made better observations, the math became increasingly messy. To explain weird planetary motion, like Mars appearing to move backward, they had to keep adding complicated fixes. Eventually, astronomers like Copernicus, Kepler, and Galileo helped show that Earth and the other planets orbit the sun instead. So yes, humanity spent a very long time assuming the entire universe revolved around us. 19. Illness came from bad air. For centuries, many people believed disease was caused by miasma, basically poisonous or foul-smelling air. If something smelled horrible, people often assumed it was literally making them sick. And again, this wasn't a crazy guess. Rotting garbage, sewage, dead animals, and filthy environments do tend to be linked with disease. The problem is that the smell itself wasn't usually the cause. The real cause was often bacteria, viruses, contaminated water, or poor sanitation. But before germ theory, people didn't know that. This belief shaped medicine, city planning, and even public health. Some people carried flowers or herbs to protect themselves from disease. It wasn't until scientists like Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch helped establish germ theory that medicine finally shifted toward the real causes of infection. So in a weird way, people weren't completely off. They just blamed the smell instead of the microbes. 18. Bloodletting was good medicine. For a very long time, one of the most common medical treatments was removing blood on purpose. This was called bloodletting, and it was used to treat everything from fevers to headaches to infections. The idea came from the ancient belief that the body was controlled by internal balances. And if you were sick, something inside you must be out of balance. So doctors often tried to fix the problem by draining blood. Sometimes with knives, sometimes with cups, sometimes with leeches. And yes, this was considered normal medicine for centuries. In many cases, it probably made patients weaker, more dehydrated, and less likely to recover. That said, there are a few narrow modern medical situations where controlled blood removal can still be useful, but as a cure-all, absolutely not. For most of history, though, if you showed up sick, there was a very real chance the treatment would be, let's take some of your blood and see what happens. Not ideal. 17. The body was controlled by 4 humors. This was one of the biggest medical beliefs in Western history. The theory said your body was governed by 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. According to this system, being healthy meant these fluids were in perfect balance. If they weren't, you got sick, or even developed certain personality traits. Feeling sluggish, too much phlegm, feeling angry, maybe too much yellow bile, feeling sad or depressed. That might be blamed on black bile, which is actually where the word melancholy comes from. This idea influenced medicine for over 1,000 years. Doctors used it to explain disease, emotions, behavior, diet, and even the seasons. And even though it sounds bizarre now, it was one of the earliest attempts to build a full theory of how the human body works. It was wrong, but for a very long time, it was the explanation. 16. Life could appear out of nowhere. People once believed that living things could just spontaneously appear from non-living matter. This idea is called spontaneous generation. For example, people thought maggots came from rotting meat, that mice could emerge from dirty rags and grain, that life could just sort of happen. And again, without microscopes or modern biology, it looked convincing. Leave meat out, maggots appear. Leave food sitting around. Pests show up. Case closed, right? Not quite. Scientists eventually showed that life wasn't magically appearing. It was coming from eggs, microorganisms, or existing life that people couldn't see. Experiments by people like Francesco Redi and later Louis Pasteur helped disprove the idea. But for centuries, many people truly believed life could just pop into existence if conditions were gross enough, which is both scientifically wrong and somehow still very believable if you've ever forgotten leftovers in the fridge. 15. Your skull shape revealed your personality. In the 1800s, a lot of people believed the bumps and curves of your skull could reveal your intelligence, morality, and personality. This was called phrenology. According to phrenologists, different mental traits were linked to different parts of the brain, and they thought those traits would literally change the shape of your head. So if someone felt the right bump in the right spot, they might decide you were naturally honest, aggressive, artistic, selfish, or brilliant. This became wildly popular. People got their heads read. Charts were made, social judgments were formed. The problem is, it wasn't real science. It had no reliable evidence behind it. And it was often used to justify prejudice, class bias, and racist pseudoscience. Phrenology is now considered a textbook example of how something can look scientific without actually being true. Basically, it was astrology, but for your skull. 14. Fire contained a substance called phlogiston. Before modern chemistry, many scientists believed that things burned because they contained a special fire-like substance called phlogiston. The theory said that when something burned, it released phlogiston into the air. Sounds neat. Except there was one massive problem. Some materials, like metals, actually gained weight when they were heated and transformed, which is awkward if you're claiming they're losing some invisible substance. Eventually, scientists like Antoine Lavoisier showed that combustion involved oxygen, not phlogiston. And just like that, one of the major explanations for fire collapsed. It sounds strange now, but at the time, phlogiston was a serious scientific idea. It's a good reminder that even smart people can build very elegant theories, on top of completely wrong assumptions. 13. A mysterious ether-filled space. For a long time, many scientists believed that empty space wasn't really empty. Instead, they thought the universe was filled with a mysterious invisible substance called ether. Why? Because light was known to behave like a wave, and people assumed waves had to move through something. Sound travels through air. Water waves move through water. So surely light must also travel through some invisible cosmic medium, right? That was the logic. The problem is that experiments kept failing to find this substance. Eventually, Einstein's work helped show that light didn't need an all-pervading ether to exist the way scientists had imagined. So for a while, scientists believed space was full of an invisible material nobody could actually detect, which, in hindsight, should have raised a few more eyebrows. 12. Continents never moved. Today, plate tectonics is basic science. But when Alfred Wegener proposed continental drift in the early 1900s, a lot of scientists thought the idea was absurd. The suggestion that continents had once been joined together and then slowly moved apart sounded impossible. To many experts, the Earth's surface was basically fixed. Wegener did have evidence, matching coastlines, similar fossils on different continents, and geological patterns that lined up across oceans. But he couldn't fully explain how continents moved, and because of that, many scientists dismissed him. Eventually, better evidence from seafloor spreading and plate tectonics proved he was largely right. So yes, even in relatively modern science, people once strongly believed continents were just permanently stuck where they were. Turns out Earth is a lot more mobile than it looks. 11. Stomach ulcers were mainly caused by stress. For a long time, many people, including doctors, believed stomach ulcers were mostly caused by stress, spicy food, and nervous personalities. And while stress can absolutely make symptoms feel worse, it turns out that most peptic ulcers are actually caused by Helicobacter pylori bacteria or certain medications like NSAIDs. That discovery completely changed treatment. Instead of just telling people to relax, avoid spicy food, and calm down, doctors could actually treat the real cause. This is one of the best examples of how a believable explanation can dominate for years simply because it sounds right. Because yes, stress can make your stomach feel awful, but for many people, the real culprit was bacteria all along. 10. Mental illness was caused by demons or possession. Unusual behavior, hallucinations, seizures, or mental distress were often explained as demonic possession, curses, or supernatural punishment. And when people don't understand what they're seeing, they tend to explain it through whatever worldview they already have. So if someone heard voices, had violent mood swings, or behaved in ways others couldn't explain, they might be feared, punished, isolated, or subjected to rituals instead of medical care. This wasn't true everywhere in the same way, and history is complicated. But broadly speaking, many societies explained mental and neurological conditions through religion, magic, or spirits long before modern psychiatry and neuroscience existed. It's one of the saddest examples on this list, because the consequences were often very real for the people involved. People weren't just wrong. Sometimes they were wrong in ways that made suffering even worse. 9. Witches could cause real physical harm through magic. During various periods in history, especially in Europe and colonial North America, many people genuinely believed witches could cause illness, crop failure, bad weather, death, and other disasters through supernatural powers. This wasn't fringe thinking. It was taken seriously by courts, churches, and communities. A famous example is the Salem witch trials, where accusations spiraled into panic and people were prosecuted based on fear, superstition, and unreliable testimony. When bad things happened and people didn't understand why, they often looked for someone to blame. And if a society already believed in witchcraft as a real physical threat, those accusations could become deadly very quickly. So yes, for a disturbing stretch of history, many people believed supernatural harm worked almost like a criminal weapon, and people died because of it. 8. Illness could be treated with mercury. This one is horrifying. For centuries, mercury was used as a medical treatment. People used it for all kinds of conditions, including skin diseases and infections like syphilis. The thinking was basically, if it does something dramatic to the body, maybe it's working. The problem is that mercury is toxic. It can damage the nervous system, kidneys, and other organs, so in many cases, the cure could be almost as dangerous as the illness itself. But before toxicology and modern medicine, doctors often worked with limited tools and incomplete understanding. And mercury, unfortunately, was one of those tools. It's a perfect example of how powerful and effective are not always the same thing. If a treatment is intense enough, people may assume it must be helping, even when it's actually poisoning them. 7. Heavier objects fall faster than lighter ones. This one feels true. Drop a bowling ball and a feather, and obviously the bowling ball hits first. So for a long time, people believed heavier objects naturally fall faster than lighter ones. This idea goes back to Aristotle, and it stuck around 4 centuries. The problem is that air resistance messes with what we observe. In a vacuum, where there's no air to slow things down, objects fall at the same rate regardless of mass. That's why on the moon, a hammer and a feather can hit the ground together. So what looked like common sense turned out to be incomplete, and that's one of the sneakiest kinds of wrong belief. The kind that looks obvious. 6. The human body could be read like a personality map. Long before personality tests in psychology, people often believed your body could visibly reveal who you were inside. Not just your skull, your whole face and body. This broader belief is often called physiognomy. People thought facial features could reveal honesty, criminality, intelligence, morality, and trustworthiness. And unfortunately, this wasn't harmless entertainment. These ideas were often used to justify discrimination, social bias, and terrible assumptions about entire groups of people. Humans are very good at spotting patterns, even when those patterns aren't real, and physiognomy is a perfect example of that. It gave people the illusion that they could see character at a glance, which, if we're being honest, is a mistake people still make all the time. 5. Disease was caused by imbalance, not germs. This connects to a few earlier entries, but it's worth its own spot because it dominated medicine for a very long time. Before germ theory, doctors often explained disease as some kind of internal imbalance rather than infection. The body was thought to become sick because it had drifted away from a natural state of harmony. And if that was your model of disease, then your treatments made sense. Purge the body, drain blood, induce sweating, force vomiting, rebalance the system. The problem is that diseases caused by bacteria or viruses don't care whether your internal energies feel balanced. You need the actual cause, and until medicine shifted toward evidence, microbes, and controlled experiments, people were often trying to solve illness with the wrong map entirely. For people could be born criminals. In the 1800s, some thinkers argued that criminals could be identified by physical traits, like jaw shape, forehead slope, or facial structure. The idea was that criminal behavior was biologically obvious and could literally be seen on the body. This sounds ridiculous now, but it influenced law, policing, and social attitudes in very real ways. It gave a fake scientific veneer to prejudice. And like a lot of bad historical ideas, it thrived because it offered something people love, a simple explanation for complicated human behavior. Instead of asking hard questions about poverty, trauma, environment, social systems, or psychology, people could just point at someone's face and pretend the answer was obvious. History is full of bad ideas that succeeded because they were convenient. This was definitely one of them. 3. Vital force was needed for life. Before modern biochemistry, many people believed living things contained a special non-physical essence called a vital force. This idea is known as vitalism. According to vitalism, life wasn't just chemistry or physics. There had to be some extra spark, something unique and invisible that separated living matter from non-living matter. And honestly, that idea is understandable. Life feels different, a plant, an animal, a person. They seem fundamentally unlike rocks or metal, so people assumed life required a special ingredient. But as biology and chemistry advanced, scientists found that life processes could be explained through physical and chemical mechanisms without needing a magical life force. Vitalism slowly faded as science got better at explaining what living systems actually do. So yes, for a long time, people believed life itself needed a hidden force. Turns out, reality is weirder and more impressive than that anyway. 2. The Earth was only a few thousand years old. For much of history, many people believed Earth was relatively young, often only a few thousand years old. That estimate often came from religious chronologies and traditional interpretations of history. And before geology, radiometric dating, and deep time science, people had no obvious reason to imagine the planet was billions of years old. But as scientists studied rock layers, fossils, erosion, and radioactive decay, it became clear that Earth's history was staggeringly vast. Not thousands, not millions, billions. That completely changed how humans understood time, life, evolution, extinction, and our place in the universe. Because once you realize how old Earth really is, human history starts to look unbelievably tiny. One common sense was usually good enough to explain the world. This is really the big one for most of history. People often believed that if something felt obvious, looked obvious, or had always been known, it was probably true. And to be fair, that's how humans survive. We rely on intuition, but history shows over and over again that intuition can be wildly misleading. The sun looks like it moves around us. Bad smells seem like they cause disease. Stress feels like it should cause ulcers. Heavy things seem like they should fall faster. And yet, over and over, reality turned out to be stranger than common sense. That's probably the biggest lesson from this entire list. People in the past weren't stupid. They were just working with limited information. Which raises a slightly uncomfortable question. What are we confidently wrong about right now? And what will future people put on their version of this list? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.